Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining this evening, morning session, depending on where you are, I suppose, and whether you're joining now or watching the recording after. Glad you're here. So today we're going to give an overview of some of the tools that will be useful for your hackathon projects. So first up, we are going to go with the Square Model Context Protocol server, so the MCP server. And we're joined by Richard from the block team. He's going to walk us through a bit how it works and how exactly you might start playing around with it to work on your idea. So without further ado, I will hand it over to Richard. And thank you.
I will talk about the Square Model Context Protocol first, and then we will go over Goose and how that kind of fits in with MCP. Not that long ago, Square released an MCP server. It's a remote MCP server that allows you to programmatically access the entire surface of Square's APIs through an LLM. And we have documentation here. You can find it quite easily at just developer.squareup.com. And then just search, you can search for MCP, or it's like /doc/MCP. But you will find all of the guides on how to integrate it with Claude, Goose, Cursor, Windsurf, or you can actually just sort of see like we have how you can fit it into any MCP client. The Square MCP server is a remote MCP server. One thing that is not actually quite documented in here is that if you were wanting to use this directly with your own access token, then you can actually just provide that in the authorization header when connecting. And I might be able to show a quick demo of how that works, because it is a little bit different than the usual flow. And then the last part I would say is that we're also here to talk about Goose. Goose is an on-machine AI agent that you can use to build and do tasks. And so it's not just for coding. You can actually connect it with all different types of extensions. And that is like what gives it that agentic quality to it. We'll skip this error. So I will briefly show what this can look like. So first we'll go, this is the desktop client. I will say that you can go into the docs here and you will see that in the installation we have both a desktop and a terminal client. So whatever your preference is, they both are functionally the same. It just depends on what interface you prefer to use. So I would recommend going into the Goose docs in order to like see the different ways that you can configure this depending on what your LLM provider is and whether you want to do something that's in the CLI or the desktop version. So I will quickly just start showing you folks what the desktop version looks like. So from here, you can see that we have, let's make that a little bit bigger, a basic sort of chat interface here. When you actually download Goose, you will actually get sent to a LLM configuration page. And so from there, you would actually then be able to sort of select which LLM provider you want to use. You'll see here that this is like what is connected to our own Databricks instance. So we generally recommend Claude 3.5, or you can also use Claude's latest Claude 4. Part of the reason that we have this recommendation in terms of utilizing Goose is that it just tends to be better about tool calling. And that is kind of like the key part of having an effective agent. And so if you're trying to do anything that's agentic, you're generally going to have a better time with Claude 3.5. You can also use Claude 3.7, but again, Claude 4 Opus also work very well. From there, we can sort of see that we have different modes within Goose. You can have it in fully autonomous mode, manual, smart, or chat only. The way that I would sort of explain this for folks is that autonomous is you just let it do whatever it wants. It will just call tools, and it's not going to sort of ask to permission to call particular tools. If you're concerned about that, you can go into fully manual mode, where for every single tool call, you have to give an approval for it. And then there's smart, which is kind of a hybrid between autonomous and manual. And so in certain instances, it will ask you to approve certain types of tool calls. It might be like, say, creating a new file or overwriting stuff in a file or deleting a file. Things that kind of like are not easy to undo. You can actually have it like do approvals to that. And then chat only is really going to give you more like a chat GPT like experience where it's not going to be able to do any kind of tool calling that you might say want to build a context before it actually goes in and calls any of the tools. So that's kind of the basics of the different configuration portions here. You can also, of course, like add files to add into the context. And then the important part that I think everyone should be using is the extensions. So Goose will come with some predefined extensions here. You can see that we have computer controller and developer, the most common ones. And then you can add more extensions going into the future. And those can just be added by following any kind of like regular MCP installation process. So we will go down and I will show connecting the Square remote MCP server. So I'm going to go ahead and enable this. And we see that we already failed this activation. So we're just going to actually reinstall it. Oh, okay. Now why I have to do this? All right. So we will go back here and we're just going to actually go to installing it with Goose. And let me just find the remote link. Apologies, it usually doesn't require this here. So we're going to go ahead and open Goose, confirm that I want to install this extension, and then it's going to go through the activation process here. You can see that the Square MCP server was successfully activated. It's fantastic. So I'm going to go ahead and refresh my Goose instance. Hit OK. And now that I have the Square MCP server connected, we're just going to verify that we see this in here. We can see I have a Square remote MCP server connected. Now, the key thing to sort of understand here is that so far I haven't plugged in any kind of credentials into this. So I will preface that if you're going to be using Square and our MCP server, it is very much recommended that you have a Square account to begin with, and you can just go to developer.squareup.com and sign up and create an account. Because what will happen here is I'm going to run a query, and you're going to see what the OAuth flow looks like because I haven't done the direct access token flow. So I'm going to just say, tell me about my Square account. And then it will call some tools here, and it's going to sort of figure it out. And I'm reasonably certain it should end up. Okay, I already had an existing auth token, so it's going to go ahead and start making calls on behalf of me. While it's doing that, I can sort of give an explanation of how the Square MCP server is designed. We followed this way of layering tools within our Square MCP server. So you'll see in this like first call, we have like light instructions to the LLMs that it should call this get service info first. And that actually just tells it all of the various services that Square offers. This prevents it from overwhelming the LLM so that it will look at what services Square offers based on what we asked it to do, and then figure out which of the services it needs to call. Then it calls this get type info, where it'll basically figure out how to map the request information to the various services that it's trying to call. And then in the final tool, it will actually go and make the API request. So we call this sort of like the discover, plan, execute tool flow. I just mentioned this because in case you're building your own tools and you're running into issues around kind of designing and structuring this, I highly recommend following this pattern. And if you want to see a little bit more on that, we have it in our blog where I wrote a blog post about how we actually design these tools. So with that, you can see that it went through here and it already started telling me stuff about my business and my locations. And this seems like some pretty basic stuff, but I might say that I wanted to actually go change stuff in my account. So I see my business hours are 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. For my main location. I might tell it like, let's update my business hours to 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. And it's just going to go and figure out how to actually run through the various calls to make that happen. And I know that this is, for this particular hackathon, this isn't the most interesting of the types of tool calls, but you have to remember that you can actually make any kind of changes that our APIs offer, and the LLM will actually go figure out how to go run those for you. So if I wanted it to create an invoice for me, we can actually go ahead and try like, let's create an invoice for $100 and to charge to Moot at block.xyz. All right, let's stop that. I said change. And we'll just sort of see like how it can actually go and achieve this. I haven't actually tried going and creating invoices, but I'm pretty sure that it will be able to figure out most of this. And if it doesn't, we can always correct it. But this is kind of just showing this in action. And I know that this is also in the desktop version. A lot of folks will probably want to end up using this in the CLI version because one thing I will walk us through while that's running through its executions is there is the ability to run tasks. So this is kind of like what we refer to almost like as like a headless mode. So once you have the CLI actually configured, you can see that you can like run in the CLI here. Let's make that a little bit bigger. Goose run, and then here's a text flag to say like, here's just instructions, and it will basically feed that into Goose to hand off to the LLM, run through some various tool calling. And this is kind of like a one-shot prompt type thing. But you can additionally like say, create an instructions file and say like goose run, and then here's instructions in a markdown file. And you can actually have it run this dependency security audit. So like you can maybe have this placed within a file somewhere, and then maybe on a cron job, maybe you actually are like calling this programmatically from your own code to say like, hey, go and execute this particular script with Goose, and Goose will kind of like run through all this analysis and can do updates within your code base dynamically. So it's quite powerful in that you can just, I've seen instances where somebody used Goose as like, they had an instructions file and it said like, oh, go spin up Kubernetes for me and, ensure that it has, however many pods running. They've kind of just used it as this like, agent that can just kind of help with infrastructure running and error analysis. So it's kind of limitless in what you can go and do. So we see that we had to kind of run through all these various tools and see it already figured out that all the information for creating an invoice, and then it realized it needed to create a customer first. So it went and checked the customer service, created the customer, created an order, and then it eventually created the invoice here for us. And so we can already see that we have this URL here. I'm going to pop this open, and you see that we already have an invoice created. And so that is actually just showing on the creation side. You could have it on the read side where it might read through existing invoices. I know that we have an example there on the challenge for what you can actually build around this. And so I think that pretty much covers this. I don't know if there's any room for questions, but I know that we're coming up to, I think it was about 20 minutes. So yeah, that should cover Goose and the Square MCP server.
Right. So thank you, Richard, for that explanation.
Sure.
I'm not sure if we have questions this time around, but
okay.
Of course. So if we do get questions, obviously I will forward them to you or forward them to the blog Discord.
Great.